New footage has just come out that appears to show a U.S. Tomahawk missile striking in Manab, Iran, on the same day and at the same location where a girls' school was hit that led to the death of 175 people, mostly children between ages 7 and 12. Now, I was waiting to make this report until we had the official response from the U.S. government, but it's been 8 days, and at this point, we now know that the strike was carried out with a U.S. weapon. It hit in an area targeted by the U.S. At the same time, IRGC facilities were destroyed in the near vicinity by the United States. All the available evidence points to this being us. This was a U.S. strike that hit the girls' school. And you don't just have to take my word for it. We're going to run through a bunch of different analysis here, starting with Bellingcat. But we've also had, just in recent days, the Associated Press, Wall Street Journal, Reuters, CNN, USA Today, The Guardian, and the New York Times come out with their own investigation saying, yeah, this was a U.S. strike. But starting with the new footage, Bellingcat says this shows a U.S. Tomahawk missile hitting an Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps facility in Manab, Iran on February 28th, showing for the first time that the United States struck the area. The footage released by Mer News and geolocated by Bellingcat also shows smoke already rising from the vicinity of the girls' school, where 175 people were reportedly killed, including children. They added that the U.S. is the only participant in the war known to have Tomahawk missiles, saying Israel is not known to possess this specific munition. So we know, based off of this footage, that it was a U.S. munition used in this strike. There's one check. And again, this happened 8 days ago, and we don't have anything officially from the government at all. To Secretary Hegseth's credit, he continues to say an investigation is ongoing. That's the best we've got until yesterday, when President Trump asked about this, said it was Iran.
Mr. President, did the United States bomb a girls' elementary school in southern Iran on the first day of the war and kill 175 people?
In my opinion, based on what I've seen, that was done by Iran.
Is that true, Mr. Hegseth? It was Iran who did that?
We're certainly investigating.
Still investigating.
But the only side that targets civilians is Iran.
We think it was done by Iran. Because they're very inaccurate, as you know, with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran.
Now, I know the sound isn't perfect there. It was on an airplane, so if you couldn't hear it exactly, he said, quote, "In my opinion, based off of what I've seen, that was done by Iran. We think it was done by Iran because they're very inaccurate with their munitions. They have no accuracy whatsoever. It was done by Iran." This doesn't help us win the war. All right, striking a girls' school, killing children, killing civilians does not help us at all. That doesn't move us closer to the elimination of the Iranian regime, the freedom of the Iranian people, any of this. It puts our troops at risk. It puts our civilians at risk. It makes this conflict even harder to achieve the objectives. This is an unnecessary failure. And mistakes happen in war, right? Unfortunately, mistakes in war are often lethal and lead to tragedies like this. Hopefully not to this scale, but this is the type of thing that happens when two parties are trying to kill each other. But for the first wave of strikes being carried out inside of Iran at a war where we chose when to kick it off, that's unacceptable. We're going to get into this here in a minute, what I think happened. But again, mistakes are acceptable. This is one that 100% should have been caught. Now, the pushback that we've had in recent days is not just silence from the U.S. government, but instead some suggesting that any thought that this could have possibly been the United States was Iranian propaganda. In fact, here's the White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt saying, listen, the U.S. does not target civilians. I agree. We do not deliberately target civilians. But in talking to this strike, she says, be careful. There's a lot of Iranian propaganda out there you don't want to fall for.
Did the United States airstrike a girls' elementary school and kill 175 people?
Not that we know of, Sean, and the Department of War is investigating this matter, and I would just tell you very strongly, the United States of America does not target civilians, unlike the rogue Iranian regime that targets civilians, that kills children, that has killed thousands of their own people in the past several weeks, and uses propaganda quite effectively, and unfortunately, many people in this room have fallen for that propaganda, so I would caution you from pointing the finger at the United States of America when it comes to targeting civilians, because that's not something that these armed forces do.
So we're going to move into the New York Times analysis that they did of this strike. This and all of these resources will be linked in the description below. And I understand folks will look at the New York Times and say, no, bias, liberal, hack, whatever. Fake news is the term that has been awful in recent years. You can also look at the assessment from, we'll put all of these in the description, the Associated Press, the Wall Street Journal, Reuters, CNN, USA Today, and The Guardian. Now we have Bellingcat to that as well. And there's countless others that have done their own investigations into what happened here. The New York Times said, quote, the February 28th school strike in Manab, which killed dozens, including children, appears to have been part of an attack on an adjacent naval base in southern Iran, where officials said U.S. forces were operating. The strikes were first reported on social media shortly after 11:30 a.m. local time. An analysis of those posts, as well as bystander photos and videos captured within an hour of the strikes, helps corroborate that the school was hit at the same time as the naval base. One video, pinpointed by geolocation experts, showed several large plumes of smoke billowing from the area of the base and the school. So we now know that it was a U.S. munition. Again, the Bellingcat analysis of the Tomahawk coming in. We can add to that the strike happened at the same time. All right, the New York Times continues by saying, the imagery shows that multiple precision strikes hit at least 6 Revolutionary Guards buildings along with the school. 4 buildings inside the naval base were completely destroyed, and 2 other buildings showed impact points at the center of the roofs consistent with such precision hits. So we know it was a U.S. munition, that this school was struck at the same time that other U.S. strikes were occurring in an area where the United States was going after viable military targets. They say specifically, General Kane said, quote, along the southern axis, the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group has continued to provide pressure from the area along the southeastern side of the coast and has been attriting naval capability all along the strait. So it was a U.S. weapon. It happened at the same time that the U.S. was carrying out strikes in that area, that the U.S. was going after Iranian facilities in an area of focus, specific focus of the U.S. military. Now, one thing I want to hit on here, because I saw another, we've got to have some humanity, got to have some integrity, got to have some honesty. If there's ever a time where that's needed, it's war. And I've seen folks recently, officials recently say, well, they were hiding behind the school because there was a school near this naval base. Now, the article goes on here to say it's not a part of that naval base anymore, but just to set the record straight, like in the United States, all of our military bases, the big ones, have multiple schools on the base. All right? You can say that that's a bad idea or that we shouldn't do that or whatever, but like we do. They're there. Like depending on the base, I think Fort Campbell goes all the way up through high school. All right? So you've got preschool, elementary school, middle school, and high school on U.S. military bases. All right, that's where they are. Again, you can argue that we shouldn't do that or any other country shouldn't do that, but suggesting that a school inside of a U.S. base is a viable military target is nonsense. We've got to be better than that. We are better than that. They say the school at one point was part of the Revolutionary Guard's naval base, according to satellite images from 2013 reviewed by the Times. Roads had led from other areas of the base to the school building that was struck on Saturday. But by September 2016, satellite images show the same building was partitioned off and was no longer connected to the base. Publicly available satellite imagery shows the structure bears the hallmark of a school, including a sports field and other recreational areas that were added over time. They say some theories have circulated online suggesting that a misfired Iranian missile was responsible for the strike on the school, but the Times and other online analysts debunked this claim, in part in determining that a single errant missile would not have caused such precise and targeted damage to several buildings across the naval base. We're at a point where I'm not entirely sure what more data and information, visual data, we have that people need to see to recognize that this was a U.S. strike. Again, mistakes happen. This is a tragic mistake, no doubt. I think an avoidable mistake, but now is the time for our senior officials to step up and own this. The only way to improve upon the situation from where it is right now is acknowledging what happened here publicly. In speaking of that allegation that this was an Iranian missile, again, every one of these analyses is every one of these assessments pushes back on that because that was rampant in the opening days. The Guardian says shortly after the attack, misinformation began to proliferate online. Some social media accounts claimed the footage of the school was from an old footage shot in Pakistan, a claim that has since been debunked. Several X accounts also made viral claims that the school has been struck by a misfired IRGC missile, but the photographs of the misfire that they present as evidence were taken about 1,600 kilometers away from Manab in the city of Zanjan. Look, I get that we don't want this to have happened. We do ourselves and our country and our service members a disservice by denying reality. I'm hard-pressed to look at all of the information, all of the evidence we have at this point and say that something else entirely happened. And if we aren't honest with ourselves and address this head on, it helps nobody. And it hurts everybody that you think you're protecting by pretending that this was something that it wasn't. You know, continuing to harp on this being a rogue Iranian missile when there's no evidence to support that at all. And all of the claims that have been used to say that have since been debunked. That doesn't help anyone. You can win an argument online with some random anonymous account, but for the actual people that are in harm's way right now, it's they're the ones further at risk because of this. We have to own up. We have to accept what happened here. So in terms of what I think happened, again, take this with a grain of salt because I have the same information right now that you all do. One thing, we do have this belief that U.S. munitions are 100% accurate 100% of the time, and they miss. They just do. Not often, but it does happen. They're not perfect. And there's any number of reasons that can go into that. A personal example I have is we were in a firefight with the Taliban in Afghanistan in 2011. We called in an airstrike on their position, and when that bomb detonated, it was probably 8 kilometers off from where it was supposed to impact, like further away from the target than we were from the target. All right. The bomb had not correctly deployed. I think it was an F-18 dropping that munition off of one of the carriers that was supporting us. Either way, it was a GBU-12 500-pound laser-guided bomb, and it didn't deploy correctly, and it veered wildly off course, and could have killed any number of people when it hit. Our munitions are not perfect. That's a possibility here, that the munition missed. The other part here, which if that is the case, that doesn't take away the tragic nature of what happened. But again, it's been 8 days. And as of this recording, we don't have anybody in the U.S. government owning up saying we did that and here's what happened. 8 days. We found out about that bomb in Afghanistan about 48 hours later. And we had no internet connection where we were off the grid and got that report back in time. The idea that we wouldn't be able to piece this together is a little bit ridiculous. The second possibility here is that it was bad targeting. What I mean by that is as these plans are put together, there's a series of enemy facilities that are located, and you have a target list of what you're working through, what effects you're trying to achieve, what munitions are used for various targets across the spectrum. It's possible that the school was listed, again, going back to some of this historical analysis, it may have at one point been a part of an IRGC facility. It looks like that changed about 10 years ago. So it's possible that that was bad targeting and somebody did not update that target block. To not update a target block over the course of 10 years and not refine that and double check that when we are conducting the opening wave of strikes is negligent, to say the least. That should have been reviewed by multiple people that would have caught that. Again, if we're able to tell that this is a school from publicly available satellite imagery, and it's not like a secret school, it's well known inside of Iran, there's no excuse for that still to be listed as a viable military target. Now, I do think that we are likely to see more situations like this in the coming days, weeks, and months, however long this campaign goes on. The reason I say that is U.S. Central Command issued a statement earlier today where they said, quote, "The Iranian regime is using heavily populated civilian areas to conduct military operations, including launching one-way attack drones and ballistic missiles. This dangerous decision risks the lives of all civilians in Iran since locations used for military purposes lose protected status and could become legitimate military targets under international law. The United States military takes every feasible precaution to minimize harm to civilians, but cannot guarantee civilian safety in or near facilities used by the Iranian regime for military purposes. Unlike the Iranian regime, U.S. forces do not target or intentionally risk the safety of civilians." The timing of that is notable. It makes me think that we're probably going to see an increase of U.S. strikes in more heavily populated areas. And look, there has been plenty of evidence of Iran using civilian infrastructure to hide military activities. That would not be a one-off case happening in Iran. But the warning coming from CENTCOM, and this isn't a warning to the Iranian people. That's kind of how it was framed. But the Iranian people don't have access to the internet right now. And they're certainly not monitoring the CENTCOM Twitter account to find out if they should go outside or not. So this is more a message for the American people. And the reason I think they're doing that is if you think back to the middle of the war in Gaza, it was, it felt like daily, but at least a weekly occurrence where a strike would occur and somebody would say, wait a minute, that was a school, or that was a hospital, or that was a mosque. And immediately the information space would just get awful of it was a mosque, but there may have been Hamas activity inside of it. Or it was a school, but it's not a school because now there's tunnels underneath it. And this gets into a really, really messy scenario. So technically, legally, that is correct. CENTCOM is spot on when they say if these facilities are used for military purposes, they lose their protected status. That is correct by the law of armed conflict. All right, so if a hospital is being used to hold missiles in the basement, the hospital loses its protected status. If a school is housing an infantry company, it loses its protected status. That is a different conversation than kind of the moral aspect that I don't think will go over well in the United States. We'll see how this school strike goes over, but looking back, Iraq and Afghanistan, the internet was such a different place. People didn't have the real-time updates like we do right now. And imagine if the war in Gaza was playing out, but those were U.S., like genuinely U.S. munitions, U.S. aircraft, U.S. missiles carrying out those strikes. And we were seeing the footage of that being done by U.S. forces. I don't think the American people are ready for that, on board with that. And for all of the arguments, and I'm in the camp that the Iranian regime is bad and they should go. I don't know that I and many Americans are in the camp of ready to see hospitals razed to the ground, schools destroyed, school children killed, because again, that does not help our purpose. We're better than that. I know we're better than that. And I am hopeful as we wrap this up that we hear a statement at some point acknowledging that we are the ones responsible for this and doing whatever we can to make sure that it doesn't happen in the future and to try to do anything we can to do right by the families of those young girls that were tragically killed about a week ago in southern Iran. But again, for anyone interested, every one of those sources will be linked in the description below. Read through them at your own interest. It's a lot. I think my perspective is it all points back to this was very clearly a U.S. strike. I don't think it was intentional. I think worst case, it was probably negligence in terms of the targeting cycle. But either way, it's something that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed soon. That's all we got for now. Thanks for watching.